The deepening and now public rift between Benjamin Netanyahu and Joe Biden now threatens the US-Israel relationship. The latest flashpoint is Rafah. Washington has warned the ground incursion can be a mistake, while Israel stands firm on its decision. Here's a report.
Friends for decades. The ironclad relationship is fraying at the edges. Joe Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu are close to breaking point, arguing incessantly over the war in Gaza. While some of this has been in public, much sparring has been behind closed doors. Prime Minister Netanyahu told lawmakers that Israel has to be united against the US on its Rafah plans. This strong statement came hours after Bibi and Biden had their first phone call in 2 months.
We have an argument with the Americans about the need to enter Rafah, not about the need to eliminate Hamas. The need to enter Rafah. We see no way to eliminate Hamas militarily without destroying these remaining battalions. We are determined to do it.
Rafah, the once infamous trade and rest city, is now a tented zone. Over 1 million people are sheltering here, all of them displaced multiple times from parts of Gaza. Israel now plans to launch a ground incursion into the cramped city, in its mission to wipe Hamas off the face of the earth. A plan the US says it can't support. After the Biden-Bibi call, both Tel Aviv and Washington came out with selective statements. While Netanyahu focused on Rafah, the White House spoke at length about aid entering Gaza, where over 2 million people are facing the biggest man-made horrors in recent history. It is not just Biden. Many other senior leaders are also calling out Netanyahu and his strategy in Gaza. Among them is America's highest-level Jewish lawmaker.
I also believe Prime Minister Netanyahu has lost his way by allowing his political survival to take the precedence over the best interests of Israel.
I think Schumer's statements are wholly inappropriate. I think we're not a banana republic.
Rumors of America seeking to oust Netanyahu was also mentioned in the Biden-Bibi talks. Axios has reported that Biden told Netanyahu he is not trying to undermine him politically. This was after Netanyahu reportedly complained about Biden's endorsement of Schumer's speech. Bibi asserted that public political attacks against him in the United States are interference in Israeli politics. Throughout his career, Biden has been a staunch ally of Israel and also its current prime minister. But the current US political landscape and the upcoming polls puts the American president in a bind. Biden cannot risk losing his pro-Palestine voter base, but he also needs Jewish votes for re-election, which is why President Biden is trying to keep Israel close. But its prime minister at bay.
Dov Zakhaim is the former Undersecretary of Defense in the George W. Bush administration and is currently a senior advisor at Center for Strategic and International Studies, is now joining us live from Washington, D.C. Mr. Zakhaim, welcome to the show. What if the offensive in Rafah goes on undeterred, despite Washington warning that it will be a big mistake? What will be the consequences of that? And will there be any repercussions for Netanyahu? Simply put, what's the worst action that the U.S. will take against the Israeli Prime Minister or Israel as a whole?
Well, let me give you a bit of history. When Israel went into Lebanon, at one point, Ronald Reagan, who I would argue was as much a supporter of Israel as Joe Biden, maybe more, phoned at the time Prime Minister Menachem Begin and said, if you keep this up, we're finished. Within 20 minutes, Begin started to change his policies. Now, there's no indication that the Israelis will move on Rafah during Ramadan. That would create huge problems for them on the West Bank and in Jerusalem and on the northern border, which means that Biden still has a little bit of time to essentially tell Netanyahu, don't do this because there will be consequences. One other point that must be taken into account, when Senator Schumer, who spoke about both his love for Israel and his concern about Netanyahu's leadership, he was speaking for the majority of the American Jewish community. There is a very vocal minority among the Orthodox Jewish community in particular. Even there's a minority that supports what Schumer was saying. But Schumer is not alone. And that's why Biden said what he said. And if you might have quoted additionally, what Biden said was essentially that the American Jewish community also supports Schumer. Netanyahu knows this, and to some extent, we're talking about a game of chicken here. Netanyahu is essentially daring Biden in an election year to stop Israel from what he, Netanyahu, wants to do. And Biden always has the threat of cutting something off from support for Israel, which, of course, would be a major blow, not just to Netanyahu, but to the country of Israel, which is why Biden is holding off for as long as he can.
Let's talk about that support, Mr. Zakhaim. There are two aspects that I want you to decode for us. On one end, the U.S. supporting Israel and its efforts to fight Hamas. And on the other, Biden is not supporting or even backing Netanyahu. Do you see the disconnect here? Because people are asking, what's the divide in America? What's that all about? Do you see it?
Well, Biden's approach and the approach of the United States government is not to let Hamas go, which seems to be the kind of implication that Netanyahu wants to signal. Rather, it's that it should be a much more precise approach that goes after the Hamas leadership, that decapitates them, that essentially avoids the mass bombing that took place at the beginning of this war. Netanyahu insists that he's got to do this with a ground invasion. Our people on the American side believe that's not necessary. Netanyahu has agreed to send an Israeli delegation to sit down with the American military and others to discuss how this might be done. But publicly, he's still opting for a ground invasion, whereas on our side, there's a strong belief that Israel's fundamental objective, which is to decapitate Hamas, because there's a belief here that you're never totally going to eliminate Hamas, and even if you did, there'd be a new kind of Hamas that would arise, because it's ideological and religious as well as political. The belief here is that we could certainly weaken Hamas, help Israel to do that, maybe not destroy it, but simply shunt it aside for a new kind of government, maybe in coordination with the Palestinian Authority, that would create a new opportunity for the people of Gaza.
Okay, I've been talking to Dov Zakhaim, who is the former Undersecretary of Defense in the George W. Bush administration and also currently a senior advisor at Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. Dov Zakhaim, thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thank you for having me.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.